Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, coming straight from the Upward Sports studio. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail, where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for what we are able to do in His name. Amen. Well, I am your running host, Dean Thompson. Today, we're going to share a story about dancing, running, and laughing. Not necessarily in that order. You don't want to miss that. And then I'm going to talk about why I think it's important to understand the things that you do, including, but not limited to, running. And joining me for those stories and much, much more is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
Well, it's hoodie weather again.
It is. I know it.
3 days ago, it was 81 degrees. Today, it's 50. So,
what in the world is going on? It's that dogwood winter? Is that
dogwood winter? Yeah, because the dogwoods are blooming.
Yep.
So next will be blackberry winter.
All right. And then we're done.
Maybe. Yeah.
We're open.
Just never know.
Yeah.
How's your week been?
It's been a good week. We had our Easter service. The sunrise service for Easter is always cool, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love it. Although I had a rough day running on Easter. So on Easter, I looked at my accumulation of miles, and I realized I needed to run a little bit further than I had planned to run to get a nice even number for the month.
Because you got to have that. I'm surprised you said that.
I know. Well,
usually you're not like that.
I'm not usually, but it would allow me to say that I've done something I've never done before, which is to run 3 consecutive months at a certain number. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And that was the most miserable 9 miles I've run. It was so hard. So it was one of those things, though, where I was thinking, all right, I'm training for this 100-miler, right? And so in that 100-miler, I'm going to want to quit. I'm not going to want to keep going. So this is my opportunity to practice, keep going when I don't want to go. And that's what I...
So how are you feeling about it?
Carried me through it. The training?
Well, the race? The training? Have you gotten to the point where you can kind of start to set do you have a pace in mind at this point? Or are you still dialing that in?
No, I've got a pace in mind. I'm pretty well set on what pace I'm going to run, but I'm really having a hard time making myself run at that pace.
Yeah.
And it really hurts to run at that pace. It hurts more to run at a slower pace than it does to run at a faster pace.
I used to always say that. It was because it's just pounding your joints. The cadence you normally run, you get very efficient at it. Yeah. But when you try to change that, I always found that it was harder on my feet. It felt like it was harder on my hips, just joints. And so, especially the feet. I think the feet was the biggest thing for me.
Absolutely. Well, we had a post from last week from Rebecca Olsen that I liked. She said, I've struggled getting my runs in the last couple of weeks, just not feeling motivated. And then my treadmill broke. But my treadmill is fixed. It's a new month, and I have goals to hit. 6 miles today, followed by day 1 of the plank challenge.
So I think that was Shannon that put the plank challenge out there.
He did, yeah.
That's cool to see these challenges popping up kind of organically. I like that.
Yeah.
Patrick did the 30 days of 1 mile a day or more. And Yeah,
it is pretty cool. And it's amazing if you do one of these challenges. It's really amazing at what it can accomplish in just 30 days. I mean, for this one in particular, it's a plank challenge, and you might only be able to do a plank for 30 seconds right now, but you'd be amazed at trying to follow that plan, how long you'll be able to do it by the end of the week. It's pretty cool. Of course, she talks about her treadmill being broken. And, I wouldn't know if my treadmill was broken because I don't ever use it.
Yeah.
I think I used it maybe 2 or 3 sessions this year. And there was one time where there was a reason, I don't know if I was sick or something was going on, and I decided to get on my treadmill. And I think I did it twice. And I was like, I'm going back outside.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I come in the other day and Lane had just finished, he was doing a brick. So he had just ridden a ride, and he was coming in. He was running right off the bike, and he was upstairs on the treadmill. And it was
a nice day.
Saturday morning, maybe Saturday morning. I mean, it was beautiful outside, and I just, some people don't mind a treadmill. Of course, the treadmill where we have it now is facing outside, and it's upstairs. So, but still, I don't care if it's raining. I would just much rather be. I don't remember the last time I got on that treadmill.
Yeah.
But yeah, some people like it. I mean, some people enjoy it.
And if you do, listen, we're not denigrating the treadmill. If you like the treadmill and that gets you going, by all means, get on that treadmill every day.
Sure.
But it's so easy to let things like a broken treadmill, bad weather,
busy schedule.
Yeah, busy schedule. All those things to get in our way. And this is what I love about a Monday or the beginning of a month, or just like I just talking about that month, that last day of the month motivated me to run a little bit more than I would have run otherwise. And there's just something about that fresh start is like that too.
Well, and sometimes when you're just not feeling it, I did this the other day. We were talking about beforehand. I was going to go out and I was just going to walk 3 miles. And I called a pastor friend of mine. Actually, he's the associate pastor at our church. I said, hey, I'm headed up to the church property to walk a few miles. And he come up and joined me. And Dean, I was planning to walk 3 miles. I blinked and we'd already been 7.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it helps to, do something different or get somebody with you.
Good point.
We were both surprised because we were deep into theology on some things that I won't go over on this podcast. But before I knew it, we had walked 7 miles, and we were like, "Wow,
that's good stuff."
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah, I like when it works out that way. A lot of times it works out the other way.
Yeah,
You look down, you go, "Oh my gosh, only." Our trivia question from last week was this: give me one practical way to know when your running shoes need to be replaced. Of course, there's a bunch of different ways to know. For me, the first, most obvious one is when the rubber's worn off the bottom, it's time to replace them, because
probably far beyond at that point.
You don't want to be running on the midsole on the foam. It doesn't work well. Mine are usually I don't ever replace mine before I wear out the rubber off the bottom. I usually wear out the rubber before I replace them. And one way to notice that too is you may start slipping around like on grass and stuff. You may notice that you've lost a lot of traction. You look down at the bottom of your shoe and you realize, well, that's why.
Slick.
It's slick. Yeah. So that's one way. Another way is, running shoes, they say, are good for 300 to 500 miles. Now that varies by person. But if you've got 500 miles on them, it may be time to replace them.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't track their mileage on shoes. I don't track my mileage on my shoes, but some people do.
Sure.
And that's a good thing to do. But I know people, Rebecca Poe, she can't get 200 miles out of a pair of shoes before she's just ripped them to shreds.
Yeah.
And I probably get about 800 miles out of a pair of shoes typically. So there is some play with those numbers. So don't feel like at 500 miles you have to replace your running shoes, but you need to check these other things and see if it's okay to keep going with them. So another one is just age. If shoes are over a year old, what happens is the midsole starts to break down over time. And so if the shoes are too old, it's why you got to be really cautious when you buy last year's model.
Yeah.
Because sometimes last year's model, you get them, and if it's a 2 years ago model, there's a good chance you might get them, and the cushioning may not be as good.
Yeah.
Now, today's midsole materials are a little bit better than they used to be. It used to be a pair of shoes that had been manufactured 2 years ago were probably not even good to use. Today, a lot of these last a lot longer, and so but it's another thing to look at, your age. Are you an overpronator or a supinator? If you look at the back of your shoes and it's leaning one direction or the other, and it's just permanently broken down that way, it's probably a good time to replace your shoes. Now, for somebody who's a severe overpronator, that means replacing your shoes more than every 300 miles.
And making sure you got the right shoes for that.
And that's the other thing too. If that happens, you may want to check on the style that you're using. You may want to wear something that prevents that from happening.
And a good picture, I just thought of this in my head, but a good picture of what you were talking about with the foam breaking down. If you use sponges in your house, like if you have one around your kitchen sink, notice what that sponge does after a period of time. It starts to get hard and kind of brittle. That's exactly what the foam in these shoes does. Not quite as fast as a sponge, because we're soaking that every day. But that's kind of what happens, and you usually can't see that because it's covered up with the fabric of the shoe and things like that. But it's why when you put on that new pair of shoes, it feels like you're sticking your foot into heaven. Yeah, because it's so cushiony. The foam is so soft at that point.
Yeah. Which is the next thing. If your shoes just don't feel as bouncy as they do when they're new, then that probably
they're probably not.
Yeah, you probably need to replace them for sure. The twist test is another thing that you can do. Twist or bend but check the flexibility of your shoes. What happens a lot of times when shoes get age on them, they get super, super flexible, and you can twist them and they just feel like, a little more than a sock. Right. When they get to that point, it's time to replace them. So that's something you kind of got to get a little experience in to understand just how much, because some shoes just are more so notice how flexible your shoes are when you buy them, and then check them later.
Sure.
If you get extra fatigue or soreness, you're just noticing my hips hurt more than they normally do after a run. It could be that your shoes need to be replaced. So that's the first thing to think about. When you get any kind of a little ache or a pain, I think the first thing you think about is, are my shoes worn out?
Well, and I don't know, you may know the statistic. I don't, but I think the percentage of injuries that can be traced back to a shoe are pretty high.
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would absolutely say so. Yeah. And running on a shoe that's worn out and continuing
it's either worn out
or
wrong for you.
Yes.
Probably leads to would you say greater than 50%?
I don't know if I'd go that high.
Yeah.
But I think it's significant for sure. Yeah. If you're getting blisters, that may be time to replace your shoes. And if you get them from the time that they're new, you probably need to look for a different style. That's not just a new shoe. You need not just a new shoe as in a new pair, but a new style as well. Because you should not get blisters in your running shoes. There's a running shoe out there that you can use that will not give you blisters.
I had a problem a few years back, and it was the same shoe that I've always wore, but I started getting blisters with this new pair of shoes. But it was the same model, same everything. And I went and I took the shoes back to Chad. And I said, look, there's something faulty with these. And he gave me a new pair. And I wore them. I started getting blisters from those. Well, come to find out, it was the insole. Asics had evidently a bad batch of insoles. And they weren't cut. It was just, not enough you could really even see it. But it wasn't big enough to fill that area up. And so the edge of my foot was kind of sliding down in that. Well, evidently it was a whole run or batch of shoes that they had this problem with. So they sent me new insoles, fixed it.
No problem.
Yeah.
Wow.
But they had put these wrong insoles in a whole batch of shoes.
What a great example.
I don't know that they do recalls on shoes necessarily, but they probably should have.
Yeah, they should have.
Yeah.
Well, I would accept any of these answers and more. There's probably some other things that you can do to your running shoes. Some people probably want to replace them when they get dirty. That's up to you. If you want to spend that money, I'm not replacing them when they get.
But the fact that they don't look dirty is also not an indicator that they're still good.
Good point. Yeah, good point. Yeah. That's true.
Upward Sports equips churches to run self-sustaining sports ministries in their communities. Whether you're a sports fanatic or on staff at a church, Upward Sports will give you all the tools you need to run a first-class sports ministry that allows you to reach families in your community. Upward Sports offers basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, and softball through league and camp offerings. At Upward Sports, we want to help your church make a difference and give you increased opportunities to share the gospel. Learn more today at upward.org. That's upward.org.
Okay, we're back, and we're still looking for stories. So we're at the bottom of the barrel right now. So I need you. If you have thought about sending in your story, I need you to do it now. Now's the time to write your story. So
the best time was last week.
Right.
The next best time is right now.
That's right. So just get it done. Just do it. Just do it. You'll have fun doing it. I think you'll have fun. I think it's fun. So write your story, send it to us, go to runforgod.com, go to submit your story, and just follow the directions there.
Sure.
And put it in there. Yep. All right. Well, this was posted on Let's Run.
This is insane.
This headline: Nike announces new $5,000 running shoe, the most expensive ever. You read that right. It's not a pair of shoes for the 5K. It's a pair of shoes for $5,000. Nike, whose shoes have been worn by many world record setters, is unabashedly setting a new world record for the most expensive retail price for running shoes. This audacious development has its roots in September 2023. It was during that month that Ethiopian distance runner Tigist Assefa shattered the women's world record and the marathon while wearing a pair of Adidas shoes, the Adizero Pro Evo 1, and delivering a much-needed victory for the German brand in the running shoe arms race. But Adidas's super shoes, which at the time was priced at $500, were not widely available. And mere days after Assefa's stunning achievement, it was reported to the Telegraph and discussed on our world-famous message board that the shoes were selling on the secondary market for up to $3,000. This, far more than Assefa's record, got Nike's attention. The market has spoken, said Dirk Jan van Hammeren, Chief Marketing Officer at Nike. If people are willing to pay that much for Adidas, why would we sell our best shoes for any less? Given our unrivaled reputation in the world of competitive athletics, Nike's ought to fetch an even higher price. We will remain committed to having the most expensive shoes on the market, period. We may get outrun, but we will not be outpriced. Nike's new $5,000 shoe, dubbed the Nike 5000 Super Pro Extra Evo 1 Plus, will be available in sporting goods stores and online beginning this month.
I can't imagine a single sporting goods store in this country carrying a pair of those. Do you think this is real?
No, this was a joke. It was posted on April 1st.
Oh, okay.
And they had a number of stories.
Oh, I see your note here now.
Yeah.
You got me.
They posted 5 or 6 different stories just like
really?
This. Yes, that were all April 1st jokes. And it was so amusing. It was so much fun. So,
I didn't even hear any jokes this year besides this one. April 1st got by me before I even realized, because I'm usually a jokester. I'm usually pulling something. But
and you didn't do any.
Well, you got me on this one.
Well, how about a joyful story from one of our favorites? This is from our resident clown, and I only mean that in the most endearing way. This is from Jerry Snider, and he writes a story called Dance Lessons. Life is short, and there will always be dirty dishes, so let's dance. James Howe, author. While I'm waiting for Dancing with the Stars to call and invite me to make a guest appearance on their show, I have a few thoughts to share with you. Country music singer John Michael Montgomery had a hit tune called Life's a Dance. Here's the chorus. Life's a dance, you learn as you go. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow. Don't worry about what you don't know. Life's a dance, you learn as you go.
He was a great theologian, John Michael Montgomery.
If we follow what Mr. Montgomery is saying, then I've been on the dance floor over 70 years now, and I want to share a few of the steps I've learned. Bart Yasso, like me, is a runner. He is an author and spokesperson for Runner's World magazine. When he lectures, he will talk about his training, favorite races, running shoes, and the friends he has made in his decades-long career. But the most important thing he says, in my opinion, comes at the end of his presentation, and that is simply, have fun. Best-selling author Wayne Dyer explains Bart's theory this way. When you dance, your purpose is not to get to a certain place on the floor, it's to enjoy each step along the way. I start my day reciting this verse from Psalm 118:24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Oprah Winfrey takes the verse a step further. She says, every day brings a chance for you to draw in a breath, kick off your shoes, and dance. As you learn to dance, you're certain to make a few mistakes. Check out this Hindu proverb. He who cannot dance puts the blame on the floor. Take responsibility for your mistakes, learn from them, and get back on the dance floor. And please, make sure you're dancing to the kind of music you enjoy and not for someone else. Pianist and composer Louis Horst said, dance for yourself. If someone understands, good. If not, no matter. Helen Keller said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. Our dear friend Anonymous put it this way, take more chances, dance more dances. And playwright Samuel Beckett chimed in with, dance first, think later. It's the natural order. Author Vicky Baum quipped, there are shortcuts to happiness, and dancing is one of them. Our last bit of wisdom on the dance of life comes from Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire was called the greatest popular music dancer of all time. You'll find his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And his biography includes just about every award an entertainer can receive. So I think Fred is a pretty safe bet to give us some sound advice. He said, do it big, do it right, and do it with style. And in the spirit of Snoopy, I say, here's to your happy dance. Jerry does it again.
He does.
Now, I'm not a dancer. I don't know about you, but I'm just never have been much of a dancer. My wife did teach me how to do the electric slide, though.
Really?
Yeah. I can't remember how to do it now, but I did know it one time. And you know who taught her how to do it? Do you remember the running back William Andrews for the Atlanta Falcons? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's who taught her how to do the electric slide. Yeah. So interesting, huh?
Kind of going back to my talking about dancing. I used to be a dancer. So when we were in high school, now picture this. Picture a high school crowd doing this. But when we were in high school, going back to my country music roots, this song, the John Michael McGowan song, was written about this time this was going on. But there was a few of us at my high school. You know, I rodeoed at the time, and we heard about this chicken house in Ringgold that was called the Pickin' Barn. Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of it.
So we knew it was live country music, and that's really all we knew, and it was in a chicken house. So about 4 or 5 of us went up there one night, and we walk in, and Dean, we were the youngest people by 40 years.
Oh, wow.
And everybody was in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and we went and sat down in the back where they had a dance floor. It was just plywood on the floor of the chicken house. It was just plywood. They had bands up there, and they were passing at the intermission. They passed around a dishpan for an offering. Huh. And the old guy that owned it, his name's Joe B. Saunders. He's dead now. But he came back and he welcomed us. And he said, if you guys would like to dance, learn how to two-step, we've got plenty of ladies here that would teach you. So here we are, 16, 17 years old. We get up on the dance floor, and these 70, 80-year-old ladies are teaching us how to two-step. Now, I'm not kidding. Within 2 months' time, they had to add on, because it was only half the chicken house. They eventually had to open it up, the whole chicken house, because this was now the go-to place for my entire high school.
Wow.
You'd go there on a Friday or Saturday night, and there would be 100 young people there, and then 100 old people there. He didn't allow alcohol. There was no drinking. If you got out of line, he would haul you out of there by the collar of your shirt. And it was incredible. I mean, a lot of them were gospel songs, and it's one of the things that stands out from my childhood, from my early years, was the Pickin' Barn, where I learned to two-step. Because I remember I come home and I told my mom, I said, you're never going to believe what I did tonight. I went dancing. She's like, really? I said, with 80-year-old women. And she's like, really? I said, yeah. It was just
what a great story.
It was a lot of fun.
That's a good lesson for us when somebody comes into our church who's different to embrace them.
Yeah.
That he embraced you guys. And so you guys came back and brought a whole bunch of folks with you.
Yeah.
And that could happen in your church
it.
too.
I mean, these old people, they loved us.
I'm sure.
I mean, a bunch of high schoolers coming in there and, it was just
oh, you made their lives, I guarantee you.
Man.
That was
awesome.
awesome.
I mean, we went and helped them when they extended it. We went up there, a bunch of us guys, and helped them do the construction. And it was a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool. Well, I love that quote that it says, dance for yourself. If someone understands, good. If not, no matter. I think we live in this uptight world these days.
We're worried about what everybody thinks.
Gosh, we so are. And we usually think about it about people who they're afraid to step out and do something. And I saw this recently. It was a letter to a pastor. I saw it on Facebook. And the letter to the pastor, and it was anonymous. And it was like, I can't believe he's wearing skinny jeans apparently while he's preaching. And somebody thought it was inappropriate. And they said very, very pointed, not real nice things to say about it. And at what point do you get to that you're so uptight that you're worried that much about? Now, do I think there's a reason to be respectful as a pastor? I do for 100%. But people are so worried about what everybody else is doing and tearing them down. And that's why people are afraid to just dance and not care what anybody thinks, because they're afraid of being torn down like that. I think we should think about that before we start tearing people down and pointing our fingers and telling people that's not Christian-like, because sometimes they don't know any better to start with. Now, in the pastor's case, he does know better, but
we had this conversation, and I'm actually struggling with it right now of how to deal with it. But I had an acquaintance of mine this past week. He just went ripping into a pastor, and it's one of the big ones in our country. And he kind of called him a name. He used the word idiot. And it just hit me right. I mean, this pastor that he's talking about, he's not one that I listen to. It's not really my style. And so he was espousing some things that this person said. And so I came home Sunday afternoon, and I listened to 5 or 6 of this guy's messages. It's not my style. He's loud and boisterous, and he preached the gospel.
Yeah.
And I think we've had this conversation. A lot of people think that because that's not how God's laid it on my heart to spread the gospel, then it must be wrong.
Yeah.
And that is wrong.
Yeah.
We've been criticized for using running as a means of ministry. That's wrong.
Yeah.
I've always said if sewing's your thing, use that to spread the gospel. I don't sew, but that doesn't mean a sewing ministry is wrong.
Yeah.
Whatever we do, however we do it, if we're spreading the gospel, it's right.
Yeah.
And we've got to get past this pointing and calling names, writing anonymous letters. That's so unbiblical. It's not even funny.
Yeah.
They need to read their own Bible of how you deal with conflict in the church.
Yeah.
Face to face, not anonymous letter.
Right.
But embrace, cheer those people on that do it different.
Yeah.
Cheer them on.
And be careful about labeling something inappropriate. And I'll tell you, the thing that comes to my mind is back years ago, I had one of my best friends, his mother had died. I was at the funeral home. Well, he and we were all the time laughing and joking and cutting up.
I remember this story.
It's what we did, right? It's who we were. And it's how we enjoyed each other's company. And we were at the funeral home. We started laughing and joking and cutting up. And I remember leaving the funeral home and thinking, God, what did I just do? What was I doing, laughing and joking and cutting up and stuff when, he's obviously hurting.
You made his day.
But I felt bad about it because I thought that was inappropriate. a week or two later, I remember him telling me, you don't know how much I needed that in that moment. He said, that's exactly what I needed.
Sure.
And did it look inappropriate to everybody else around us? Probably. There were probably a lot of people pointing their fingers at us going, that is not right. That should not be going on here in this funeral home. But it was so therapeutic. And so we got to be careful.
Yeah.
Scripture, Ecclesiastes 3:4 says, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. That's pretty plain. I love that whole Ecclesiastes, sure. All of those, that whole list of things. Famous verses, you've heard, there's a song, from back in the late 60s, I think, about it. And there's a time and place for everything. And there's a time and place to be funny. I think about Tim Hawkins.
I was watching him just last night.
Were you? Yeah. I saw something. I never heard his Chick-fil-A song. It was funny. Of course, his Starbucks song is one of the funniest things I think I've ever heard.
Well, this one last night, and we may get emails, but it was, he said, I wrote a song. He said, I'm doing a gig at the Jehovah's Witness Church next week, and I wrote a song. And he said, he had his guitar up, and he said, 1, 2, 3, and he goes, and he said, that's not funny. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of Tim Hawkins. If you've ever been to one of his live shows, man, there's nobody sacred. Nope. I mean, he's going after and that's okay. We've had Run for God classes where we come together, all the churches in our community. And I'll never forget Jason Denson, a good friend of mine who's Methodist. He was up speaking at our church. I would speak at his church. He spoke at mine, and we just kind of shuffled it up. Well, he got up and he started making jokes about the Baptist, the Baptist jokes. It was incredible. There's a time to poke fun at each other. There's a time but yeah, you're right. We're so uptight nowadays and worried that we're going to say the wrong thing.
And how people are going to perceive what we're doing.
Yeah.
And in that case, I mean, I would dare say today, he'd be a lot more careful about going there. Now, he might still do it, knowing him, but we feel like we have to be more careful today than ever because people are pointing their fingers, and it's not necessarily Christians who are doing it. It's people who are just like, everybody's got to be so serious about everything. Man,
but it is. I mean, because that's where I'm really struggling with this person I'm talking about is we've got to stop this friendly fire.
Yes.
There's so many casualties that are from within our own faith. And we're just firing at each other because that's not how I think it should be done. Well, if it starts with an I and think, you need to pause.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Psalm 149:3 says, let them praise his name with dancing. Let them sing praises to him with timbrel and lyre. It's funny how many times the Bible mentions the word dancing. You remember the movie Footloose? You remember that movie? And that was what the movie was about. It was about dancing.
Yeah.
And it was about, this one guy who seemed to be the rebel, and that he was dating the pastor's daughter, and this pastor was like, dancing is inappropriate, period. There should be no dancing. It's a bad thing. And this guy just wanted to dance. And it was Kevin Bacon who was the star of it. And, eventually the movie moves on. It does what a typical movie does. And they eventually have the dance that the pastor forbids them to have. And everybody has fun and they just enjoy it because they're there just to have fun. And dancing can be just fun. And just like you guys, that was a great example of just having fun, right?
Yeah. Now, we need to preface and say it can be inappropriate.
That's where I was going next.
A lot of this stuff you see nowadays is, it's inappropriate.
Yes. It's like everything, right? We can take anything too far.
Sure.
I mean, there is a time when it would be inappropriate to tell jokes as well. Right. There are times when we shouldn't. We should know where that line is, and the line though is typically not where we think it is.
To the point of the verse in Ecclesiastes. Yeah, there is a time.
There is
for all these things.
Yep. But realize the dancing that they talk about in the Bible. It's always linked to praising God in some way. And so, if it's okay to dance to praise God, then then it's okay to dance, right? 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever we do, right? Do it all to the glory of God. And that includes dancing and many other things. That doesn't mean everything that we do has to be an act of worship. But it does mean that what we're doing should be something that God would look at and smile.
And be pleased.
And
Sure.
Psalm 30:11. You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and girded me with gladness. Man, yeah. Again, I just can't help but think about people who are stuffy when I read this verse.
I like that word, stuffy.
Yeah. And I think that the reason people are stuffy, if that's the word we want to use, is because they have an improper view of who God is. And I think that this verse is proof that of what I just said. I think we should be happy when we're in God's will, and sometimes that includes dancing, and sometimes it includes something else. But if that happiness spills over into dancing and laughing and other things, great.
This kind of hit me just now, the word stuffy. Sometimes this can be our problem. We have the perception that people are stuffy.
That's true too.
The older generation of the church. I've got a great story on this. Our churches, we're about to start the building process of a new project. Well, back 2 years ago, we were kind of kicking this idea around, and somehow I got nominated to be on the long range planning committee. And so we were in this meeting, and it was I was probably the youngest in there, and then there were some that were much older, kind of the patriarchs of the church that I like to call them. And I'm not going to mention any names, but one of them was in there, and he and I get along very well. I mean, I love sitting and talking to old people. My wife says I can sit and talk to somebody twice my age for hours, and I can. And so, the struggle in our church was, the younger generation wants to build, and the older generation wants to stay where we're at. At least that was the thought.
Right.
That's kind of the traditional pull is young people won't change, older people don't. And so, so I just, me, I'm blunt. I'm probably blunt to a fault sometimes. And I could feel it in the air in that room. And I said, let me just ask a question. I looked, and his first name's Charles. I said, Charles, the way I see it is that the younger generation wants to move forward with this, but the older generation is going to dig their heels in. And I kind of said, what say you? And I just looked at him, and he looked at me, and I was like, oh no, I've stepped in it now. And he said, well, and he's kind of a influencer in the older population of the church. And he looked at me and he said, I'll tell you, my generation is wondering what your generation is waiting on. And it was like an aha moment of, and we were full steam ahead from that point on. But sometimes we have these preconceptions that everybody's afraid to talk about, like that. Yeah. It was the assumption that the older generation thought we were reckless and they were not going to do anything, when in reality, we were all on the same page, but we come in with these preconceived ideas of what other people think, when the older generation just wants to dance too. Yeah. But we think, well, they're stuffy. And a lot of times they're not. Yeah. It's just we don't talk about it.
Wow. That's awesome. Question. When was the last time you did a happy dance? I've been going back and forth with a guy online. We've been exchanging emails for a little while now, and he hasn't been in church in many, many years. And I got an email from him recently. This guy's trying to change. He's trying to go to church for his first time in years. He's trying to run for the first time in years, and he's trying to lose weight. He's doing all these things all at one time. And
more power to him.
Oh, no kidding. But at the same time, in our exchange back and forth, he's gotten pretty frustrated. He's like, he'll dig his heels in, and then he'll go, oh, and of course, you know me, I'll be straight and honest with him. And, but it's been great. But when he sent me a message and said he went to church on Easter and he had a great time. Man, that was happy dance time. Yeah. Whether I'd physically danced or not, it was just to hear somebody to just read the joy in those words. Those are the things that get me going. Just when you hear things like that, right?
Yeah.
Another question: have you ever considered a dance class to improve your fitness?
No, I don't think I'll be going there, Jerry.
I have not tried that, but I do remember back when I was in high school, we had when I was on the cross country team, I remember we had a former athlete, former cross country runner who had graduated the year before, and she was now teaching what back in that day was called aerobics classes. And she came in and did an aerobics class for our cross country team. She wore us out. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Cause it's a whole different kind of endurance. Right. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And it just goes back to the point of what he's talking about here is that dancing to me is a physical manifestation of laughing. You know, like laughing is just, you can't be mad and laugh. You can't do those two things.
Sure.
You can't dance and be mad.
Right.
You can't do it. I guess those classes are called Zumba or something like that. Well, Zumba's probably out now. It's probably something
No,
else.
I think Holly Kimsey still teaches it.
Is she still doing Zumba?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that stuff is great.
Yeah.
And I think this is all about being a little bit better. Talking about taking a class to try to improve your fitness. There's all sorts of things we can do. This is not a bad idea to do this. When we had Spider on here and we talked about the diet, that's what he talked about, how, just do one thing and be a little bit better than you were yesterday. And if you want to hear that, that's on episodes 13 and 14. He talked about his plant-based diet, and he's really, really strict on what he does. And most people who are really, really strict on what they do will tell us, this is the way you should do it. That's not what he did. Right. It was more like, here's what you should do. And we feel so much more liberated when we feel free to do it the way we want to do it. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. So dancing, doing some sort of movement class, walking, running, they're all something good for you, but do something. Sure. Do something that's good for you. Do a little bit better than you did last time. Question 3. Have you noticed how hard it is to dance and be depressed at the same time? Kind of just said that, didn't I? Just stole his thunder.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's true. You just can't do it. And of course, I think that it works, with running a lot of times. And I know you're this way too. Sometimes you just get to a point where you just need to loosen up. And of course, dancing is something that loosens you up, but running can do that too.
Sure.
And there's a lot of time. I mean, I've had a rough week this week, and from an emotional standpoint, and going for a run just makes me feel better. It just, I don't even know what it is about it. I don't know if it's getting your mind off of it a little bit or what it is, but it can clear your mind up and put you just in a better place.
Yeah, I mean, you can be tied in knots. Yep. I mean, I just said this the other day with the pastor friend of mine who went out and walked with me. You can be tied up in knots and get outside for an hour and walk or run or ride a bike or whatever. And it's like, I mean, we've said it before. We're not psychologists, but man, you could save a lot of money on therapy sessions.
Yeah.
Just by getting some running shoes or a bike or going for a walk, because I mean, I'm like you. I can mentally be drained. We do things that kind of mentally drain us sometimes. Physically drain us, mentally drain us. But the mental part's the worst part. And so I'm probably one of those people that could have a tendency to, I have gone off the deep end mentally before. My wife will tell you that. But it's amazing it's better than any medication you could ever have. It's just getting out and walking or running. Getting out and enjoy. Put the phone down. Mm-hmm. Even turn the watch off.
Yeah.
And just go out. And gosh, there's so much that does for you.
It really
mentally,
is.
Physically, spiritually, all the way around.
Yeah. We've all done that thing where you just you walk out the door and you feel the air. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, that feels so good, right?
Yeah.
I remember back when I was a human resources manager, and you work as a human resources manager, and it's like one negative thing after another. You got people complaining, and you're dealing with benefits, and somebody wants to get money out of their 401k, and you're just trying to deal with all of these things that are just, and it gets overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And I remember whenever I would get to that point where I could feel my blood pressure going up if I get one more question, and what I would do is I would get up from my desk and I'd go, I worked in a plant setting, and I would go walk through the plant and just talk with people. Mm-hmm. Changed my whole demeanor, right? It's just going out and doing something.
It's for that reason that I say, you've heard me say on here before, that people that hold their calendar up to you and it's just and they're so proud of it. I'm not.
Nope.
That's a recipe for disaster, if you ask me. I mean, not that we work hard. When it's time to work, as Ecclesiastes said, there's a time for that.
That's right.
And when it's time to work, we work hard. But when I turn it off, I turn it off.
Yeah.
And everybody listening should do the same.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Because in the world we live in today, more so than ever, you can fill every minute with something that's, and I'm using air quotes here if you're listening, that's important.
Yeah.
But is it important is the question you got to ask yourself. Is it more important than, and I don't like to get into the whole mental health thing because I don't know enough about it to really talk about it, but is it good for your mental health? Are you going to blow a gasket on your wife and kids later on?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then it's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Shut it down.
So if you're having a bad day out there, maybe try getting up and dancing.
That'll work too. Your kids would love that.
It is so hard to stay on track as a runner or a walker. The world also makes it difficult to stay on track spiritually too. For pennies a day, Upward Sports Run for God Run Club can make both of these journeys more fun and much easier. Join the Run for God Run Club and get access to training plans, videos, and the best group of active Christians you will find anywhere. Go to runforgod.com and sign up today. All right, we're back. Well, last week we shared a story of the first woman to finish the Barkley Marathons. It was a great story, right?
And I watched some commentary
on that,
on her.
Yeah,
that was pretty incredible.
Pretty inspiring, wasn't it? Was. Yeah. Well, this one's probably equally inspiring. This week we're going to talk about Camille Heron. This comes from therunningchannel.com, written by a guy named Mark Dredge. And he writes this. This was never a challenge where records would be broken on the first day, which actually is an astonishing thing to consider. The idea of running for a full day, for 24 hours, is incomprehensible to almost everyone. The fact that Camille Heron broke 13 records during one event, yet didn't see her first one until she'd run for 48 hours and 247 miles is staggering. From there, 42-year-old American ultrarunner Heron collected new road distance records for 300 miles, 500 kilometers, 600 kilometers, 400 miles, 700 kilometers, 800 kilometers, 500 miles, and 900 kilometers. And she broke time records for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, and 6 days. All were world records, apart from the 48-hour record, which is now the American record. In total, she ran 560.33 miles or 901.76 kilometers in 144 hours. Here's how and why she did it. Lululemon's Further was initiated with three main purposes: to showcase products specifically designed for women, to understand physical performance at extremes, and to break records. The event, which was held in La Quinta, California, on a certified course which measured as 2.55 miles or 4.1 kilometers, brought together 10 women of varying backgrounds and aspirations in long distance run with one goal: to take women's running further than it had gone before. 6 days? If you sometimes find it hard to motivate yourself to get up early for your midweek runs, then just imagine starting a run on Wednesday morning and knowing you won't finish it until just after breakfast next Tuesday. The 6-day event isn't actually something new or made up for this campaign, and in the late 1800s, pedestrianism saw crowds gather in arenas to watch people engage in competitive walks which lasted for 6 days. Remarkably, it was the most popular spectator sport in North America at that time until people moved to watching faster-paced things like boxing and baseball. The 6-day event waned and disappeared before returning in the 1980s, and new records for men and women were set. Heron passed the women's record of 549 miles at 3:30 a.m. on the final night, with 6 hours left in the challenge. While she'd go on to pass the 900 kilometers, she fell short of one final record, the men's 6-day. She had hoped to surpass 644 miles, or 1,036 kilometers, which was run by Yannis Kouros in July of 1984, but after days of running, the records weren't the only thing that was broken. Her body was. Heron posted an update to Instagram a few days after the event where she shared her post-run recovery. "I don't feel well right now," she wrote. "World records always break me in every way. 6 days was an extreme overload that went beyond typical muscle brain fatigue pain. I was losing control. The control I had of my organs. This included incontinence and bowel control. Somehow I found a way to stay positive, happy, and to keep going. It was worth the pain and suffering." In a later post, she explained how she got her period on the 2nd day, and she talks of how this affected her and also how she used it to power herself on. And then there was all the food. She explained how she had sore lips, mouth, and tongue from all the food she had to eat to try and replace the more than 42,000 calories that the run burnt. During the run, a constant supply of tacos and alcohol-free beer helped her keep going. Heron has also won many marathons and ultramarathons, including the Comrades Marathon and Spartathlon. She also holds the world record for the fastest marathon dressed as a superhero, Spider-Woman, at 2:48:51. And she was the youngest woman to run beyond 100,000-mile lifetime miles, which she passed in April of 2022 at the age of 40. These new records add to the remarkable achievement of a remarkable athlete. After the 6-day run, Heron posted a photo to Instagram of the specially designed Lululemon trainer she wore, and with it she wrote the caption, "To the moon we go." Based on the lifetime miles she's run, Heron is mathematically close to halfway there, but these distances and times she continues to achieve have become much more than just moonshots and small steps forward. This is the stuff of giant leaps.
That's hardcore.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
You know, I think the saddest part of this story, though, because it's a great story, the saddest part is most people have no idea who Camille Heron is.
No.
I mean, most people listening to this, I dare say, have never heard her name before. And you could argue that this is one of the toughest things that anybody has ever done.
Sure.
In anything, right? I think it's way more impressive than the number of touchdown passes Patrick Mahomes threw this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that gets into your mind, which is what makes it hard. I've said even to this day, I've done Ironmans, marathons, ultra marathons, but the hardest thing I ever did to this date was a 208-mile relay.
Yeah.
We were actually getting to stop, but it was over 30 hours, and it was 5 guys in one van. The hardest part about it wasn't the running. It was the mental trying to stay engaged, because you just can't sleep in a van, and you're getting in and you're getting out and you're getting sore, and so this makes what I did looked like, it was a little 1 mile fun run. But yeah, I would guarantee if you ask her, the physical part was not the hardest part.
Yeah.
It was the mental agony.
Yep. She seems to indicate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's impressive either way. So cool story. And all that leads me to this week's story. It is time for Dean's Thoughts, and that's a time when I share something that I've written about the intersection between running and faith. Well, I think it's a good idea to learn about running in its many facets, and I'll explain why. This is called In Defense of Running Knowledge. If you go to a car manufacturing plant these days, you'll see a lot of robotics. A robot can spot weld all day long and never take a break. They don't have to put their helmet up and down to see the spot and then begin welding. They can hold a 100-pound welder up with ease, and they can take that 100-pound device and make a weld in a fraction of the time that a human can do it. I know some of us look at these robots as if they're taking people's jobs, and to some extent, that's true, but it doesn't obviate the need for people altogether. Someone has to program those robots to do that job. Even if you let AI do it, someone has to set up the AI, right? So, who do you think make the best programmers for a welding machine? The best person for that job is not necessarily a college graduate with a degree in programming, although that knowledge is important. The best person for the job is someone who can learn and to program and is a welder themselves. It is important that the person doing the programming completely understands all the parameters around doing that job. Why? Well, because if the robot doesn't do it right, he or she needs to know what went wrong and how to reprogram it to fix it. It all makes perfect sense. Well, I think the same applies to running. I think the more running knowledge you have, the more you can enjoy the sport. I think it's helpful to understand that the conversational run is producing more mitochondria. That way, it's much easier to resist the temptation to run harder than you need to. I think it's helpful to know that being more flexible can reduce the number of injuries you have. That way, it's easier to motivate yourself to take the time to stretch after you're done with your run. Understanding injuries makes getting them much easier. I could go on and list a bunch of reasons, but you get the idea. In the same way, I notice that the more I understand the Bible, the more I enjoy my walk with God. I heard a good example this past weekend. Have you ever thought about the Roman guards who were stationed outside the tomb of Jesus? Do you realize that they were witnesses to the resurrection? Well, have you ever thought about what a Roman guard looks like? Most paintings will show a couple of guards outside the tomb, but most likely there were many more than that. First of all, Roman guards worked in sets of 4. That way, when it was time to sleep, they would all take 3-hour shifts to stay awake while the sleeping soldiers would lay in such a way that anyone trying to go through the guard who was awake would need to step over the sleeping guards. Also, note that in the Bible, it says they were given directions to make the tomb as secure as you know how. That means that they would have had much more than just the 4 guards. Without going into all the details, it is estimated that there were anywhere from 8 to 40 guards at the entrance to Jesus' tomb. Most likely, there were at least 20. Doesn't that change the way you think about the resurrection? It does for me, anyway. The more we know about anything, the more we will enjoy that thing. It is that simple. Make sure you gather up all the running or walking knowledge you can fit into your busy schedule. It will help you enjoy it more and learn about how and why the Bible was written, all the history surrounding it, the circumstances and how they applied to that day and time, and all about the people in the Bible. I promise you, the more you know, the more you will enjoy what God has in store for you.
It's a great story, Dean.
Yeah, I thought about this after the pastor this week. He was preaching and he was talking about the Roman guard, and it brought me back to 1985. This is how important this kind of thing is to me, because back in 1985, first of all, I went to church when I was a kid. We lived in this big neighborhood, and there was a bus ministry that came through, and I don't even remember how, but I started going to that church on the bus. Mm-hmm. There were 8 full-size buses in this church. The church had enough kids that they had their own church building. It was the original church building. They had built a new sanctuary, and they used the old sanctuary for kids' church. Mm-hmm. We actually had a church where they were all kids. It was great, and it was fantastic for kids, obviously. But I went there, and that was the experience I had. It was unbelievable, right? Well, then we moved. Well, we were living in South Miami at the time. We moved to Atlanta, and we searched for a church, and we found one. We went there for a little while. It was a little out of the way. But anyway, something happened. I don't even know what happened, but there was some kind of falling out, and they got rid of the pastor, and my parents decided we weren't going there anymore, and we just didn't go to church. So for years, I didn't go to church at all. And then I got to Georgia Tech. And while I was at Georgia Tech, first thing that happened, the first key was that I had a friend of mine who was actually a youth minister, and he got me to at least getting back to being interested in going back to church. But then one day I saw this thing posted at Georgia Tech, and it talked about the proof of the resurrection. Here, the historical evidence for the reason why the resurrection was true. And I went to that. I don't know why I went to it, but I did, and I went to it. And I remember they talked about this Roman guard along with a lot of other things. And that completely changed the trajectory of my life. Mm-hmm. Absolutely 100% changed the direction I was headed in. I was in a bad place when I first started going to college. Not to be sensational, but I was in such a bad place that I remember being so out of it that I remember being at a party with a band and pulling the microphone out of the guy's hand and singing "Honky Tonk Woman" in front of a crowd of people. Well, if you know me, I don't sing, and it would be really embarrassing for me to do that. But when you're in that kind of condition, you'll do anything ridiculous and stupid. Again, I don't say that to be sensational. I say it to say that's how bad.
That's how far away you were.
Yes, I was so far away, and this brought me back. And so a lot of times these little knowledge things, the realization, I think, is really important. I think when you understand something, I think in that moment, I just understood. I felt like I understood Jesus so much better when I understood all of that.
Well, yeah, you're right. You dug into something that you thought you knew a lot about. And the more you dig into it, the more you learn. I'm doing the exact same thing right now we talked about it earlier. Some theological doctrine, which I'm not going to go into on this podcast, but I had a spirited debate with somebody this week, and I told you, I said, I know enough about this to be dangerous. I know enough about this to make myself look like a fool talking about it. And so I've started digging into it. I spent 5 hours on it yesterday and just really digging into scripture and learn. And you're right. The more you dig into scripture, the more it strengthens your faith.
Yes.
You're never going to dig it. Now you can find and make the Bible say whatever you want. If you pick and choose and cherry pick, and I'm not talking about that. I'm saying let the Spirit do His work, go into it. Because I went into this with an open mind, because it's a doctrine that it's really not salvation dependent. It's just some doctrine that, and so I went into it with an open mind because I know what I thought, but I really didn't know why I thought it. We have those thoughts about a lot of things.
Sure.
We take a stance and we plant the flag, but then somebody says, well, why? And you're like, well, I don't know why. That's just the way I feel. And that's, it's not wrong, but that should be a point where you step back and you say, why do I? Yeah. And so it's a good idea to take some time and dig into it. So,
yeah. And I think to the point about the resurrection specifically, a lot of times we back down, and the more we know, the less we have to back down. So a lot of times we back down when somebody says, well, I don't believe in the Bible. I believe in science. Well, people say that, and I've seen a lot of Christians just kind of go, they don't know what to say to that. There's a lot we can say about that, right? I mean, because
but you got to know it.
That's right. You got to know it.
You got to learn it.
And man, you talk about strengthening your faith. You just dig into that alone, just that alone. What is the scientific evidence that the Bible is true? Just Google that and read for a day about that. Yeah. Guarantee your faith will be stronger.
Sure.
And you'll believe you won't only believe in Christ, but you'll believe in science too.
Sure.
Because you'll realize that science backs us up.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. For sure. But I think the same thing happens with running too. I think that the more we understand what we're doing, the more we understand the benefits of running, the more we understand the intricacies of running, I think the more we enjoy it.
Sure.
I see it with kids a lot of times. Whenever in coaching kids, who are the kids that enjoy running the most? It's the ones that want to understand what they're doing, why they do what they do. You know, that was one thing about Lane when, coaching Lane years ago, it was he wanted to understand why he did what he did. He didn't want to just be told, here, do this. He wanted to understand why he did it. And it made him enjoy the sport more.
But the great thing about Lane when he was younger is if I needed him to do anything, all I had to say was, it's going to make you faster. Yeah. And you need to go clean your room. It's going to make you faster. All right. I'll be right back.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, knowledge is a treasure that we can all get. But it's not found on Facebook. It's not found on the pop-ups. It's not found on, it's digging in. And because this thing I'm digging into, Lane and I were actually having a conversation about, Lane's very curious. He said, well, I'm going to go ask such and such. He said, I got a few questions and I'm going to go ask such and such. And I said, no, you don't need to go ask such and such. You need to dig into what the word says and make up for yourself. Because that's one thing I love about Charlie, and your pastor's probably the same way.
Yep.
Charlie will make statements, scriptural statements, and he says, but don't take my word for it. Dig in, because knowledge is not understanding what somebody else knows.
That's right.
It's not.
That's a mouthful.
How do you know that? Well, I saw it on Facebook. That is not knowledge. That's knowing what somebody else thinks.
Yeah.
Dig in for yourself.
Amen. There is no better way to start the day than in the Word. Our Bible in a Year challenge is a great way to start the day in the Word as I read through the entire Bible in 365 episodes. I also share running and walking tips each day, as well as encouraging quotes. Choose the self-paced challenge so that you can go at your pace. You must be a Run Club member for access to this exciting challenge. So, if you're not a member, sign up today and get started. If you are a member, what are you waiting for? Every week I share a reason why running and walking is so awesome. And this is a good one. It is multi-generational. Isn't it funny? I had no idea that you were going to talk about that dancing story with old folks and young folks, and this was the reason I came up with for this week.
Really?
Yes. Isn't that awesome? God works these things out. Well, we see people of all ages running together, right? We've seen classes with people from 6 to 80, right? And, like Co Booker, who you've heard me and him on a podcast. When he's in town, we usually find time to go for at least one run together and just kind of catch up and talk running and stuff. He just graduated college and I'm almost retired, or at least
you're not almost retired, Dean.
We're
not retiring, remember?
Almost retirement age. I meant to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me and you're going to be sitting here yapping when we're 80.
That's right.
Or you're 90 and I'm 80. Or 95 and 80. Can't remember the number.
But how many other things we just learned about one, dancing can bring people together, but there aren't a lot of things that bring people from generations together like running does. So, it's a good one. And I think running is the best one. I'm just biased that way. All right. Well, the World Cross Country Championships were this past weekend, and it was fun to watch. Peacock had it on. All 5 races, all 5 races. They had the under 20 races, men and women. They had the senior races, and they had a mixed relay And it was a lot of fun to watch. Of course, Jacob Kiplimo and Beatrice Jabet were the winners last year in the World Cross Country Championships, and they won again this year. This is an unusual time. Usually you don't have back-to-back years where they have the race, but because of COVID and all the stuff that happened with it threw off the schedule, and now they're back on schedule. So now it'll be a couple of years before they have it again, but it's a fun thing to watch. It is unbelievable how good the East Africans are when you watch that. I mean, it was Kenya, Ethiopia, and Uganda in just about every race, except for the mixed relay. Every race, they took all the medals in all the races except for the mixed relay. And that was only a bronze in the mixed relay. The women's race was the most impressive for Kenya. They finished 1 through 5, had a perfect score in the women's race. And these are some of the best runners in the world are here, and they're going 1 through 5. Man, there was an American who ran, she ran so well. Gosh, she was in 7th, 8th place most of the race. Winnie Kaladi Fresky. She's been around for a while. She was a Foot Locker champion several years ago, and she just set the American record for the half marathon. So there was a little bit of expectation for her to do well going in, but our women haven't finished in the top 10, I don't think, in quite some time. So there was a lot of hype, but she was in there 7th, 8th place most of the race, and then the next time you saw her, the people are finishing, and I'm like, where'd she go? And she just faded to 15th in the last 1K. What happened to her was she just went out so hard, and when she came in, she was stumbling, she was weaving. You could tell she just gave it everything she had, and man, it was so inspiring to watch her, and to watch her. And then right at the last, just like the last 20 meters, she's almost there, and she's weaving, and she's got no strength, and you could see it. You could see something in her brain click, and all of a sudden you saw her try to get into that sprint motion. And it was really awkward because her body didn't want to listen to her. But at the same time, he was everything she had, just those last 20 meters.
It's kind of the same picture of the girl that finished the Barclays. Right there at the end, she could tell and then she just collapsed.
Yes. Yeah.
But you know what I thought was funniest about that video of her finishing the Barclays is you can tell it was a bunch of ultra runners who knew exactly what she was going through, because at any other race, there would have been medical people all over her. And they were all just sitting around drinking their coffee, and she's laying there flopping like a fish. But they knew what was going on. She's just exhausted.
That's a good observation. I would not have thought about that.
Because I was watching, I was like, there's nobody even checking on her. They're just standing around shaking each other's hands and like nothing was going on.
Oh, what a great observation. Well, in the men's senior race, Kiplimo, golly, he's only 23 years old. That's pretty young for somebody to win the World Cross Country Championships. And he ran away from everybody like it was no big deal. Like he just ran in the pack. Mm-hmm. And in the last 1K or so, he just pulled away from everybody, and it was like it was not a big deal to him. Like he was just out for a hard workout or something. It was fun to watch. He's from Uganda. Uganda also has Joshua Cheptegei, so there were a lot of folks thinking they were going to go 1-2, but Cheptegei faded late in the race. And then Kenya wound up winning. Uganda was second, and then Ethiopia third. The Americans were 7th in that race. In the women's race, our women team finished in 4th place, so that was a pretty good showing. And the mixed relay was really fun to watch. It started out, they start out with a woman leg, and then a man leg, woman, and then man. And it's four legs. Each one runs one lap, which was like 1.8 miles or something like that. And no, what was it? It was just over a mile. So it was like 2K maybe, something like that. Yeah, I think it was 2K. And our team, the Americans, we were 8th after the first lap, and I thought, oh well. But then Ellie Donahue got it. She took us from 8th to 3rd on her leg. She ran the second fastest leg. She beat the Ugandans and the Ethiopians. Didn't beat the Kenyans, but her leg was faster than the Ugandans and Ethiopians even. Ran really, really well. Our third guy, he held that spot for 3rd, and I thought, man, this is awesome. We're gonna podium. And then our last lady faded really hard in the end and fell back to 8th again. And so, but Great Britain was a surprise third, and so they did well. In the under 20 races, we had 2 Americans in the top 20 in the women's race, 15 and 16. So that was not too bad. Kenya was behind Ethiopia and Uganda in that one. Americans again were 4th in the women's race. In the men's, we were 7th again in the men's race. The top 15 runners, every individual of the top 15 runners were either Kenyan, Ethiopian, or Ugandan. That was amazing. Well, I think this should be one of those things everybody watches on television because it's really exciting. And these courses are nothing like the high school races that we're used to watching. If you've been to a high school cross-country race, these are different because they put purposeful obstacles in their way. Mm-hmm. They had, I think, 3 bridges that they had to go up that they just constructed. Instead of where a lot of what we do in high school is you might put a mat or you might put something over a sidewalk or something. Well, instead of doing that, they built these like 6 foot tall bridges. Really? Where you had to run up and over this bridge. Yeah. And that was really interesting. They had a mud pit where it was super, super muddy for like 20 or 30 meters, just enough to just completely kill your momentum. They had a place where there was a 180-degree turn, and in the 180-degree turn, it was a sand pit. They had bales of hay that you had a choice. This was one of the coolest things. They had these bales, and they were at an angle to each other, and there was a space in between them, but that space was offset. So you could weave in between the bales of hay, or you could hurdle them. So you either had to slow down to weave, or you had to slow down to hurdle them. But you had to do one or the other. And that was a lot of fun to watch. A really cool idea. So check out World Cross Country next year or 2 years from now. You might think it was pretty cool. All right. How about a trivia question for this week? Since we're talking about World Cross Country Championships, who is the only American male to win the World Cross Country Championships? I have talked to this guy on the phone. And he won 2 of them, and he's the only American to have ever won a single one. So who is it? You got to go back a few years, I will say that. If you know the answer to that, send it to dean@runforgod.com. And if you're the first person to answer that and you're a Run Club member, you will get $20 off in the Run for God store. So send those answers in. Look it up if you have to.
And don't forget, coming up at the end of this month, let's see, let me look at the date. I should have had this on the tip of my April the 29th is the live kickoff that we're doing at 8 p.m. for the Couch to Half Marathon.
Yeah.
This half marathon, it will be finishing in St. Petersburg along with the marathon crowd. So if you didn't get in the marathon and you want to jump in the half marathon, you got to be a member of Run Club. All are welcome, $9.99 a month or 27 cents a day if you do the yearly. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee per day.
And once you get in there,
it's way better for you.
And once you get in there, you'll want to do the yearly.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
So it's going to be great. This is the first time we're testing this. And we're also going to have a Couch to 10K that finishes in St. Petersburg that starts, I can't remember when that is, sometime in July. And then we'll have a Couch to 5K that starts in October-ish that finishes in St. Petersburg. So 4 opportunities to join us in St. Petersburg. So be sure and join us at the end of this month for the live kickoff and see if it's something you want to do or go ahead and sign up, even better. Plant your flag right now.
Yeah, for sure. That would be cool. All right, how about a motivational thought of the week? It comes from Naomi Judd. Talking country music today.
Exactly.
Man.
Dean, what's gotten into you?
She said, a dead end is just a good place to turn around.
Wise words.
Well, I like that. Yeah. Like we talked about earlier, new beginnings. I like to start things at the beginning of a week or a month. It's just like hitting a dead end and starting over. I like it. Good advice. All right. Until next week, may God bless every step of every run and or walk. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.